The term serial killer did not even exist in the 1930s, but it perfectly describes the unknown madman known as the torso murderer, the mad butcher, and phantom of Kingsbury Run. America's first serial killer prowled for more than a decade and was never caught. In September 1934, the first piece of a horrific jigsaw puzzle washed up on the Lake Erie shore. Cleveland police called it the Lady in the Lake. It was the dismembered torso of a woman. Cleveland was a dirty town. Prohibition had been repealed, but corruption and danger were still everywhere. The city's mobsters, deprived of income from illegal booze, moved headlong into the business of illegal gambling and scamming immigrants. On September 23, 1935, two boys found the naked remains of a young male lying neatly on a hillside near Kingsbury Run, a gully laced with railroad tracks. The killer had cut off the head and genitals. It had rope burns on the wrists. The victim had struggled. Nearby, police found a second body, identically mutilated but far more decomposed. 60 feet from the second body was the head of the first. The young man was Edward Adversary, a bisexual petty criminal with a record of pimping, petty violence, and selling pornography. Known associates and relatives of Adversary could supply no clues to why he was killed. One possible link was that Adversary had once been a nurse in a mental institution, and the killer was, without a doubt, insane. Police tried to fingerprint the second corpse, but the putrid skin sloughed off the fingers. His identification was never discovered. Mayor Harold Burton hired Eliot Ness as public safety director. Famous for putting Al Capone behind bars, Ness took the job in December of 1935. Crime could not be fought with a corrupt police force. Ness instigated surveillance, wiretaps, and sting operations to root out cops on the take. Over a period of 2 years, scores of officers and beat cops were retired or fired. Hundreds more were transferred to other precincts where their corruption could not taint honest cops. Cleveland also had the second worst reputation in the country regarding traffic accidents and fatalities. Ness instituted new traffic lights, stern enforcement, high police visibility, and stiff fines for infractions. Increased income from traffic fines poured back into the Cleveland PD, which boasted new state-of-the-art radio prowl cars and a shiny fleet of Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Within 2 years, Cleveland ranked number 2 in U.S. traffic safety. Then the phantom struck again. On January 26, 1936, a Cleveland butcher found 2 large burlap bags sitting in the snow. They contained the neatly disarticulated arm, 2 thighs, and the lower torso of a woman. Fingerprints ID'd the deceased as Flo Polillo, a middle-aged prostitute. Near the bag, police spotted a size 12 footprint in the snow. Inside the bag, they found traces of chicken feathers and coal dust. The clues did not lead anywhere. Her head was never found. Based on an examination of the wounds, Coroner Samuel Gerber theorized that the woman, Polillo, had been beheaded while she was still alive. In June, the phantom struck again. The headless torso of a young white male was found in Kingsbury Run. A dark sedan, possibly a Cadillac, was seen nearby the night before. This body had distinctive tattoos and still had its hands, yet the FBI fingerprint index came up negative. The anonymous victim would be known only as the Tattooed Man. The lead detective, Pete Merlyo, exchanged information with other police outside Cleveland. Similarly mutilated bodies found in other train yards indicated the killer may have been riding the rails from state to state. Ness limited his men to their own jurisdiction. Cleveland had enough mystery without adding to it. September 10, 1936, another victim, male, 5'10", 150 pounds, decapitated, unidentifiable, known simply as number 6. This time, a witness had spotted a green Ford truck. If it was related, the killer might have more than one vehicle available. February 23, 1937. The upper half of a female torso washed up on the shore of Lake Erie. Coroner Gerber refused to link it to the 1934 lady in the lake, stating it was coincidence. 1937. The remains of a young black woman. Dental records suggested she was Rose Wallace, who had vanished weeks before, but there wasn't enough to be sure. Inside the bag with the remains was a newspaper dated June 5, 1936, exactly 1 year before, and the exact same day the body of the tattooed man was found. The killer was playing with the police and Eliot Ness. Otherwise, Ness continued his crime-busting task. Criminal Chief Mo DeLitz felt enough pressure to get out of town. Casinos run with police protection closed down. Slowly, Cleveland emerged from the Depression. Then, victim number 9. His fingernails were neat and clean, indicating he wasn't a transient, and the method of dismemberment was different. The incisions were jagged and choppy, indicating the killer was rushed or that his mental condition was deteriorating. The body had been gutted like a deer, and the heart had been ripped out of the rib cage. March 3rd, 1938. Another torso, another glimpse of a dark sedan. May 7th, 1938. The bisected torso, 2 thighs, a shin, and a foot of a black woman with morphine in her system. 6 long blonde hairs clung to her leg. Instead of the neat carving of before, the murderer had torn the head off the corpse with his bare hands. Ness, Coroner Gerber, and a dozen others held a top-level meeting to share what they knew of the torso murderer. The clues were few. Phantom of Kingsbury Run was assumed to be a man, probably right-handed. Ness felt the killer was strong as an ox, since bodies were carried to their resting places and the dismemberment lacked the jagged cuts of hesitation. Hair clinging to one of the victims indicated the killer might be blonde. Coroner Gerber pushed his theory that the killer had knowledge of surgical technique. Several bodies were dumped miles from the Roaring Third. That meant the Phantom had a vehicle available, probably his own, since bloodstains in a borrowed car could be a big problem. 2 types of vehicles had been seen, possibly indicating the Phantom had access to more than 1 car. The Phantom moved through the Roaring Third and Kingsbury Run without attracting attention, blending with the derelicts and whores. He could be a transient, maybe a railroad worker, a railroad policeman. Ness thought the killer would need a workshop, a laboratory, so to speak, to perform his butchery. It could be as simple as an empty boxcar or vacant slum room, or as complex as a doctor's surgical theater. Police scoured the tenements, any basement, attic, or unused hiding place that might have been the Phantom's den of horror. No hideout was found. The son of one of the wealthy families of Cleveland came under Ness's suspicion. A degenerate who knew the area of the Roaring Third, the man was estranged from his wealthy family, although they still held influence. Ness secretly arranged a lie detector test, which indicated the man was lying. Before he could be arrested, the suspect voluntarily entered an asylum. A legally insane person could not be arrested. Ness received anonymous letters signed "Your Paranoid Nemesis," but kept them secret, privately satisfied that the public was safe. Then, in mid-August 1938, 2 more torsos were unearthed in a vacant lot just 2 blocks from Ness's office, as if the killer were taunting him. Analysis indicated the bodies had been buried weeks earlier, but had actually been killed and dismembered more than 6 months before, and refrigerated. Political pressure called for action, any action. Ness ordered the shanties in Kingsbury Run burned to the ground and transients arrested by the dozens. The area was a fire trap, Ness told reporters. Off the record, He said this would eliminate potential victims for the Phantom. Eliot Ness's political rival, Sheriff O'Donnell, proclaimed the mystery solved when he arrested a thug named Frank Dolezal in August of 1938. The alcoholic resident of the roaring 3rd District had known Flo Polillo and was known for his brutal temper. But Dolezal's signed confession didn't match the facts, and he could not be linked to the other killings, which were no doubt the work of the same person. A public defender discovered deputies had beaten Dolezal until he signed a confession. Suspiciously, Dolezal was found hanging in his cell. Yet the murders abruptly stopped. No further bodies were found in the Cleveland area that could be attributed to the Mad Butcher. Slowly, the torso killer began to slip from memory as the city emerged from the Depression. Divorce took some of the shine off the Ness halo. Now a frequent visitor to nightclubs, Ness began drinking. In 1940, 3 corpses were discovered in abandoned boxcars in a Pennsylvania freight yard. 2 males, 1 female. Merlyo was sure they bore the signature of the Phantom of Kingsbury Run. They had been beheaded. Decay indicated they'd been there for quite some time. Carved on one torso was the cryptic word Nazi with the Z written backward. And one of the males was a transient named James Nicholson of Cleveland. Eliot Ness patiently disagreed with Detective Merlyo's theory that the Phantom might have been responsible for more than 50 unsolved homicides from coast to coast. Long after retirement, Merlyo continued his hunt. Ness never told Merlyo or anyone in Cleveland why he felt the case was closed. What Eliot Ness himself never realized was a quirk in the state law. A person voluntarily committed to an asylum can leave whenever he wants. Ness was now a divorced, middle-aged politician with a drinking problem. Losing a race for mayor of Cleveland in 1947, he drifted into obscurity. He died of a heart attack 10 years later, at the age of 54, 5 months before The Untouchables was published. The book inspired the popular Robert Stack TV series, which ran for 4 years, and the 1987 Kevin Costner remake. In death, Eliot Ness became more famous than in life. For all his real accomplishments, Ness never officially closed the case of the Mad Butcher. The Phantom of Kingsbury Run remained the one that got away.